Welcome to the Impact Driven Leader podcast with your host, me, Tyler Deckerhoof. On today's episode, I'm joined by my producer, Alex. Today is a little different. It is a live video shoot. We're going to talk about today's news events and kind of how they affect leadership in our world. So Alex, my producer, is joining me. Glad to have you on camera, Alex. We've talked about doing this. We often in our conversations as we're preparing content for the week kind of have these, how does leadership, how do challenges show up in the world? What's going on? What are people tied into? And so today we're just recording it and broadcasting it with everyone.
Yeah, no, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now and now making it come to life. Tyler, those who don't know, my house has been under construction for the last 2 months. I just moved from California to Florida, so there's been drilling and all sorts of random stuff going on. So I'm excited to take our conversations that we're having behind the scenes, to the scenes, if you will, about around leadership, about what's going on, all over the, internet of things. And we finally get to bring that, to you, the audience.
So today's format, this is what it's going to look like. Alex is going to bring up a story, a topic, something relevant in our world today. I'm going to just talk about it, rant for a moment about it, and then we'll discuss it. We'll move on. Here's the aim, is that we bring discussions into your world that maybe other people aren't having or a perspective different to empower you to go forward. And how do you proceed? That's my desire in this, is that you're empowered to find that, it doesn't need to be that difficult, but you're also not alone facing some of these challenges in our world. And how do we discern? How do we navigate through our relationships knowing that these things are hitting us right in the face? So, Alex, what's the first one?
Yeah, the first thing that, we're going to bring up and talk about, it happened about a week ago. Harrison Butker, the kicker for the Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs.
Super Bowl winning, yes.
Yeah, I think he's won 3 with them, 2 or 3. At least a couple. He did a commencement speech recently, and it's just getting all of the attention from both sides on what he said, particularly around his wife and just really, her purpose and what's been just one of the biggest things in her life, which is being more of a home.
Alex, hold on. So your mic cut out. Yeah, I can barely hear you, but it's not registering for some reason.
Hello.
Now that's better. I don't know what you just did.
Check. Yeah, I don't know.
You just did something. And it came back.
All right, we're back. But no, so I don't know where it dropped off there, and we'll do is it's all taped, so we'll cut it. But I'll go back a couple seconds. So Harrison Butker in the news, his commencement speech just about a week ago, still in the news today. Everyone's talking about it. What he said, the context it was said in, and I think there's a lot of politics being played here. The NFL's reaction towards it. And just
reaction. I've seen,
yes.
The Hunt family, their reaction. So let me kind of step in here. Yeah. Where I heard about this, I was with my wife, and she said, "Hey, do you know what's going on with this kicker for the Chiefs?" I'm like, "No, Harrison Butker. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been on social media to see." And she goes, it's all over TikTok. I'm like, "Okay, well, tell me what's going on." And she informs me about him speaking at the commencement ceremony, and that people are kind of going off on it. And she shows me a couple of people that are remixing it and, shares the clip that he, describes the impact that his wife has made on their family. Well, I get her take from it. She goes, "I don't really understand why people are upset. I've led successful businesses. I've built very successful businesses. And yet, for my wife, most proud of being a mom and the impact that has on lives in the world." I proceed to look up a little bit more about it, and I see 2 different perspectives. One that was sharing exactly what happened, that he talked about a homemaker in his commencement speech, and the other one was how oppressive his speech was to women all over the world. Well, this is my take on it, and this is what I did. I did a little bit more research and listened to him. And if you listen to the full context of his speech, not the little piece of where he does share about his wife being proud of being a mom in a wife and a homemaker,
Right.
he also says before that, hey, there's many of you in this audience that are going to find careers in fulfillment in many different avenues and industries, and that's awesome. But there's also some of you that may find the most fulfillment, like my wife, being a mother and being a wife and having a family, and that's okay. I think what's so challenging here is as a dad of a daughter, much like yourself, Alex, is I want my daughter to not feel like she has to pursue a career that is outside of being a mom in order to find fulfillment. That, quite honestly, for a lot of men, finding fulfillment is being a dad and being a great dad at that. I'm part of a group called Front Row Dads, and we often talk about being men with a family that are businessmen rather than businessmen that just happen to have a family. And that perspective is very different in our world. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just, I went on, I go on the news channel. So I check out MSNBC, I check out Fox, I check out CNN, I check out both sides, right? Both polaring sides, and just getting their takes on it, because, I just like to think and form my own opinions on, different subject matters, and just listen to how people contextualize these things. And I grew up in a house where my mom was the power mom. She had the big job. She helped raise the kids. My dad had a good job and did pretty decent. But my mom was the main breadwinner in the family, and she was also a great mom, and would make dinner when she could and take care of us and all those great things. And she did it her way. And I think it's just, there's so many ways to live your life and to choose your path that you want to choose. And if one of them is to be the stay-at-home mom who takes care of the kids, who takes care of the house, great. If you want to do the career and do that, and I think that's where in his speech, if you hear the whole thing, he alludes to that, but he's just using a personal example from his life, of how his wife is loving what she does on a daily basis. And
I'm reminded here real quick, Alex, of a podcast that we recorded a couple weeks ago with Jess Ekstrom. And we kind of had a little bit of this conversation with her, and this was before the commencement speech. And there's so many challenges. I realized it being a leader in a business, network marketing business, predominantly women, that there's more angst and more like combativeness that come from women on women than there is from what I've seen men that expect women to be X, Y, and Z. Like, I don't expect, whatever my wife chooses, if she loves doing what she's doing, then great, just do that. But don't feel like the desire to escape and blame it on me or blame it on someone else. I don't think that's right. And again, if I think about my daughter, who's 17, who's just about ready to go to college in the next year, it's like, what do I want you to? I want you to go pursue whatever you desire. And whatever that is, that's fine, as long as you put effort into it and not feel like you have to play by someone else's rules. And I think that's the confusion in here. It's not what Harrison said. It comes back to an environment that's saying, whoa, that challenges the rules that we've tried so hard to push against. And I don't think that's what he was saying. It's like, go do you.
Yeah, and I was watching some reaction videos that have gone viral across social, that I think it was some cheerleaders made of different organizations. I don't know if you've seen these, but it was almost like, stay in your lane. You're a man of privilege. You can't say that, and it just goes to the, like, everyone has opinions in this country. It's one of the greatest things about this country, both on the left side and the right side and the middle and over right, and everyone's gonna say things that upset people. Now, and this goes to leadership, like that emotional intelligence to say, hey, listen, everyone's going to have their opinions on things, and to immediately like react and say, what he said was garbage, and he's putting down women, and stay in your lane, and just tell people to tell him what he should have said in their videos. It's like, well, why can't you just take it and understand it and be like, all right, I understand your opinion. That's cool. You do you, and I'm going to do me. But instead, it's just like, no, he should have said this. It's like, and both sides do this. It's just like, these hot
Well,
takes that
they want to take it out of context to
yeah.
justify whatever they want to perpetuate. Man, that's where the world we live in today, with much of media. It's take out of context. Oh, great. Now that is the justification. That is the bibliographical information I need to justify my opinion, as opposed to understand, man, there's going to be a lot of variance, and that's okay. Use that as an example. Say, hey, good, great. But that isn't all. That isn't everything. We can be, allowed to have different thoughts and opinions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean
That,
that's the point. It's like, all right, you hear this person, and we didn't get into the NFL's reaction and just all these organizations' reaction. I mean, the NFL is, from what I've read, is not standing by their player. Um, they're kind of drifting away from him. And I don't know what that's going to do to the locker room and how that changes that dynamic, from an internal locker room perspective, that, you kind of get this, who's going to breed what within the locker room of what was said. Are they going to approach him? How are they going to approach him? The coaches, the other players in the room, because he's one of the best. By the way, this guy is one of the best kickers in the league. He helped them through the playoffs and even in the Super Bowl, from a professional sports perspective. Does that let me ask you, will that, do you think, change the dynamic within
man,
that locker room?
I think there's going to be twofold. I think he's just going to move on and say whatever. I think there's going to be people like, hey, Harrison, good for you. You do you. I think if there's any animosity, it's from outside that's spilling in. It is from outside people that want to pressure it. And I think that's going to be the leadership of the locker room to say, forget about that. Let's go play football. Let's worry about that and not worry about. I think we saw a lot of this last year similarly with how we responded to CJ Stroud in his faith comments that got cut out of a national televised interview. And all of a sudden, people started rallying behind it. I don't think we see that today because we don't have players in front of a camera being asked questions every single moment like we did in season. I think if we did, we'd be like, hey, that's his thought. That's his opinion. That's his beliefs. Don't silence him because of that. That isn't what we need in this world. Just say, hey, that's your take on it. Great, man. Move on. Let's go. I believe that's what the organization, that's what the players are going to do, but we'll find out.
Yeah, and that I wanted to ask you this question. Playing in sports, I played Division I football
Yep.
at a high level, and the talk in the locker room, locker room talk, you can be a little more straightforward, to the point. Now, here, if we take this into professional business settings, and you're a leader, and maybe someone on the team had done this speech, right? Let's remove the NFL, let's remove, professional sports team, and put X business there, right? Where you're the
Yeah.
leader, the vice president did a speech, said something. How do you think this dynamic would be held in a business setting, or how could it be handled? Is it different because from like an NFL sports team to a professional business setting, depending on where? I mean, there's probably a lot of variables that would go into that, I would assume.
I think the big piece here is just understanding the context. And the world we live in, so much is taken out of context, whether it's from social media, whether it's other forms of media that make it really difficult. And again, I mean, you look at that, if there's someone in the organization, it's like, hey, do you fully understand? Again, these are people that are with him every day. These are people that you work with every day, and you start to understand, all right, where do they align on it? And is it an oppressive individual where, all right, these comments out of context start to align with how they carry themselves outside of that? Or no, I know him, I'm interacting with him, I've spent time with him. That isn't what's taken out of context, is not the person that I know. And then you start to say, wait a second, where's the misalignment here? I think this is the biggest challenge that we have, is often the words we say are never interpreted the way that we intend. Sometimes that's on us, sometimes that's on others. But the worst thing that can happen, I think, is all of a sudden if everyone wants to silence him, as opposed to let him, play out. Let him continue to say, I said what I said and I meant what I meant. Or, hey, let me give a little bit more color to this because it deserves it. Again, what I said was go do you. And that's what I heard. That's what I heard the context of his speech. And I think in organizations where we often find this being the case, that it's be okay with your opinions because we're in that world now. As long as your opinions aren't oppressing a group, they're okay to have those opinions. And I think that's where we're trying to navigate, whether it's through getting rid of the cancel culture or it's also navigating how do we want to show up in the world as a part of our world today that we need to navigate that we haven't had to before. And we're seeing it play out right in front of us.
Yeah, and instantaneously, right? I mean, people react and post and
Yeah.
exchange and communicate instantaneously as it's happening and continuously across social, especially. And then the news adds more heat to the fire, fuel to
Yeah.
the fire. Giving hot takes and opinions on whatever it is that they're talking about, which doesn't normally help the
Doesn't
situation.
help. Yep.
And yeah, so I've seen interesting. I did a bunch of research and just looked on both sides and just how uh, strongly opinionated people are across multiple spectrums. But I think I like to be somewhere in the middle and just hear exactly how it was said and how it was said, and take the whole body of work
Yeah.
across everything and how he's kind of been. But the second thing that I wanted to talk about, which is interesting. The president, Joe Biden, gave a. We're on speeches today.
Hey, well, I mean that's what's coming
this,
at
is,
us.
this, this is the time of year, right? This is the time of year, so maybe there'll be more coming up. President Joe Biden spoke at Morehouse College, predominantly African American school in Atlanta, and this is also trending across social, where he got a standing ovation from about half the crowd, which is predominantly the older generation, the parents. But the younger generation either sat or actually, turned their back during that speech, which I found interesting. It was catching a lot of wind, and I didn't really know what path we wanted to go down
Yeah.
on this one, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I didn't actually see this myself. I did see a headline this morning. I knew that he spoke over the weekend at Morehouse College. I think this is the challenge that we find ourselves in this country. I shared this with you a week or so ago that I think we've met the precipice of voter volume by generation being predominated by the baby boomers. All right, one stat, there's 4.5 million baby boomers turning 65 every year. There's about 4 million turning 18 people, right? And so when you have that tilt, we start to see the almost decline on the back end of the generation, the baby boomers that have overwhelmed voting because one, they want to, are more active in voting. We've seen it's 40 and younger don't vote as much in our current world today. I think this is really telling. I think this is telling to say, where is the support actually at?
Yeah.
And, I had a friend, my brother asked me, this not a friend, my brother. He goes, Tyler, my kids are 17, 16, and 14. He goes, Tyler, do you think your kids are going to be able to afford to buy a home? I'm like, well, yeah, things change and things ebb and flow. And yet I also look at it as I've seen, different financial reports come out where the leverage today someone has making $100,000, say, early out of college, you have a great 6-figure job. What you can do with that $100,000, it is far less than each of the generations before us because of the value of one, the education, two, the value of the dollar. And you start considering that, yeah, where interest rates are, wherever prices are, okay. But when you look at the opportunity to, support yourself, to have options to, start a family, man, it's really challenging. And I think it also challenges the birth rate. We're starting to see that slow down. So all these things are going on. And you talk about the background, the landscape of speaking to an older generation that is, I would say, more liberal than a younger generation that is more conservative. And I'm basing that on my own kids that are, Gen Z, almost Gen Alpha, they're more conservative fiscally, what they do as far as, engage in things. And I think we're starting to see that play out. And you can tell me lies for years, and I don't know if I'm going to believe everything you say. I mean, that's a challenge in a lot of organizations with a lot of leaders in our
It's
world right now.
it's interesting just that you brought up, because my son will be 3 in August and my daughter's 9 months, so they're the generation before there. So I'm interested. Obviously, we're got plenty of time for that as time goes on. But this cyclical nature, right? If we go back to the 60s and 70s, more liberal, and then it gets more conservative, and then it gets more liberal, and it's just so interesting, right? These cycles we go through as a society of more liberal, more conservative, more liberal, more conservative. Because I would say my generation, I'm an older millennial, I'll be 37, is probably a more liberal generation. Where your kids' generation, and I have noticed that through the young athletes that have been coming in,
Yep.
are more on the conservative line, probably
Yeah.
more conservative to somewhere in the middle, but on like certain issues and topics, which is interesting. And to that point, you bring up housing and the cost of the dollar and inflation. Like, things have never been more expensive. I mean, go to the grocery store. Like, it's crazy.
Well, I mean, it's the, hey, go to restaurants, right? We have a go to church on Sunday. We usually go to Taco Bell. That's what my kids love to do. My wife grew up doing that, and so go to Taco Bell.
What do you get? What do you get? Like, what is your?
I'm not a Taco Bell person. I do like the nacho fries. I did get they have a new cheesy crunch empanada or something, cheesy chicken empanada. That's what it is. It was pretty good. And, my older son, he gets like the deluxe box. My younger son, he got a beefy 5-layer, a bean burrito, and a Doritos Locos Tacos. And then afterwards, he's explaining that it's like, yeah, I think I'm over the Doritos Locos Tacos. I'm just going to go with the nacho fries from now on. That's going to be my standard order. It's like, okay, great, dude. And then my daughter just kind of ebbs and flows. I don't think she got anything yesterday. Like, whatever. But
I love this.
What used to be like a $20 to $25 expense is now $42 to $45.
Double.
And, it is. And, one of the things that I find is interesting, yes, here in Washington, we have a higher, minimum wage rate in the U.S. It's not as high as California. But, we go through the drive-through, but I've been to this store before, and you walk in and there's 2 kiosks, 1 person at the counter. And when you look at some of the cost raises, the 2 things that are happening here that are very pertinent to our conversation is, 1, you raise the cost higher and higher, we're going to look for more automation. That is just a normal business. That can go back to the Industrial Revolution. That was driven by higher cost, more demand for output. How do we automate this, right? Even going back to Ford and the model, the assembly line. The other piece of that we go back to is now you have a generation that we're displacing the workplace with automation and or older individuals. I've seen oftentimes go to a different restaurant, go to different stores in what would predominantly be jobs that younger people, like 25 and younger, first jobs would have. I'm talking hardware store, I'm talking, fast food. It's amazing that I see a lot of people that I would consider 60 plus doing those jobs. And I think that's where it's kind of like, oh, you tell me one thing that's all these jobs, everything else. But it's like, when I go to find jobs, I can't find them. They're not available. They're not there. I have 2 friends right now that are looking for work. And one of them is in banking. And he's done a lot of interviews, put on his application. The last one, he's like, you're overqualified. And he's like, yeah, I know I am, but I want to pivot out of what I've been doing. The other one, who is in sales and kind of customer service, he applied for a job. He got laid off in December, and he's applied with over 400 people for this one job. And he himself has done several hundred applications for remote work and is not getting anywhere. And so I think this context to the, hey, I'm going to talk to recent graduates. You've spent however much money on education, and man, go out there because it's all available to you. Have you been in our shoes lately?
Oh my God, there's so much I wanna. You just went over right there on that note. Okay, going back, I'm also a fan of Taco Bell, by the way. And I have
yeah,
no.
so here's the thing. Let me give you some background on Taco Bell. I
Okay,
grew up, I went to Taco Bell. My family, grew up in Ohio. It wasn't really like Mexican wasn't something that we ate. I believe Taco Bell was Mexican food.
oh
I
my
since
God.
realized that is not the case. And there was not a lot of Hispanic influence in Northeast Ohio in the late 90s. Luckily made it to California, saw a whole different landscape.
Oh
And
yeah.
yes, Taco Bell was not my thing. So go ahead. You can go
No,
on
but
about Taco Bell.
what I was my going from California, where I know for a fact how high minimum wage is, in Florida, where I just moved
Yeah.
recently, I don't think they're the same, but the prices were still here in Florida are still very high. It's still very expensive. So and they're a massive, obviously, multinational chain. So I know that the minimum wage work in California is super high, but in Florida, I don't believe it's the same, and the prices are still really high. So across the board, what do you want to call it? Food prices or whatever, it's
Yeah.
all expensive everywhere, no matter where you are. It feels like. And then you went, the other point that you're going into in terms of jobs. I have a couple friends too, been in the workforce 15, 20 years, got laid off in November, December, right around that same time. And what is it? We're at the end of May now,
Yeah.
and they still are looking for work. They have to go below the level of which they are currently at, or where they were, to find something decent. And even there, it's super competitive. A friend of mine said that he applied for a role recently in New York City. New York City's a mess when it comes to finding good high paying jobs, because it's so freaking expensive and so competitive. There was over 4,000 people that applied. 4,000 people in New York alone for this one role. And he's just like, I'm moving to, he's originally from Florida. He's like, I'm going to move back to Florida. I love New York. It's a ton of fun. There's places to eat. It's not quite the same as it used to be post pandemic. And just go back and find something down in Florida where it's more affordable. It's just I guess where we're going, in society, in terms of good, high paying, long term jobs with, healthcare and a 401k and paid time off and maternity and paternity leave. It seems like they're just going on this declining pattern, and more of gig workers. You're seeing an increase in gig workers, but you also see that, how long is that going to last with AI, artificial intelligence, and the other things. So you have to think if where and what will this younger generation, your kids' age, that are going to be in college, and the kids that heard these speeches from the people we spoke about earlier, they have to be thinking either they're really stressed out because that job market, entry
I
level
think
job market,
that's the biggest thing that's going on there. I think there's a tremendous amount of anxiety and stress from the current college graduate. Let me just share. So we have a woman who's helped us. She's painted a few of our rooms in our home. She actually painted my studio here, and she had her daughter helping her. Okay, her daughter's 22, I think, 23, actually just graduated from college with a advanced degree. And I said, okay, what are you going to do with it? She goes, I'm here painting with my mom.
what are you
That's the
gonna do?
reality of what's going on, is that, has an advanced degree and can't find that, looking for something, is going to get married soon. And she's like,
Yeah.
yep, I'm here painting, and at least it's something, and, do good work and all those things. But it's like, how can I find that job? And I think even hearing the stress from her within that is kind of like, yeah, there's not a lot for me to go into. And I am, painting. Well, there's a lot of demand in trades, and I think we're going to
Trades, yeah.
see some, whether it's recent high school graduates that are now looking into it, say, hey, I'll just go into a trade. I talked to a guy over the weekend. His son, really good basketball player, probably could play at a higher Division 2, maybe Division 1 level. And his dad goes, yeah, if he doesn't get the Division 1 offer he's looking at, he's just going to go to trade school.
Mhm.
Okay. Can you
Yeah.
blame the kid?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, ultimately, doing what you love and finding what you love is key, right? But then you graduate, right, and you're kind of put into the world, and you want to live on your own, and you want to go out and do things with your friends and travel. Well, you got to have money, right? Like
Yeah.
you got to make an income to support the life that you want to have. And you go into these careers, or you go to school, and this is kind of one of the things I've been thinking about with my kids. My parents. My mom is very much like, they got to get a good education. They need to go to a good college. I'm like, Mom, those times are, it's different now. Like, obviously we're going to see what they like to do, whether it's sports or singing or music or construction or, whatever it is. But finding very specific, higher forms of education that isn't necessarily your traditional college, like, I don't know if that is the route society will go in, or that these bigger universities will continue to be very expensive or will they get less expensive?
I think what you're hitting on is the big point here. Let's go back to this speech that we started this conversation about with Biden, the commencement speech at Morehouse, and two groups of people, the parents, the older individuals, the grandparents, whatever it may be, and then the students themselves. For one group, man, the avenue for education and learning and being prepared for a career was through a university, was through a college, a trade school even, but it was mostly, if you want to be a higher middle class to upper class, man, you need to go to some university, especially when we start looking at the race diversification of that. It's significant. And now we look at it today. Man, you just brought up a comment about, to your mom that's, yeah, you don't have to go to college. There's so much education available for any type of industry that a lot of them are kind of like, do we need to require that bachelor's degree? Because a lot of times we have someone that has a much higher threshold of cost because of this extreme education cost they have. And they're also burnout, and they're kind of like, they're not fun to work with. Whereas
Right.
a different group that maybe didn't go to college, that kind of figured their way out, that's like, man, I'm all about being here. I'm self-taught. I'll go learn everything. Just give me the platform, or I know the online courses and platforms that I can go to
Mhm.
grow and develop. Man, I'm going that way. And I think that's the major crossroad we're at. And a lot of universities are, over the next 15, 20 years, they're going to struggle. We've seen some shut down and go bankrupt just because the high cost, the either lack of admissions, whatever it may be, that, I don't know how much they survive.
Well, how about your kids? You 17, what are all their ages?
17,
17,
16, and
16,
14.
14. What are their friends doing? What are their peers doing? Are majority going to schools? Or are they finding, like, do you know what their peers are kind of
I
doing?
would say, if I think about my daughter and the peers that she has, and, thinking about it, yeah, they are, but they're also very, very open to trade schools. And I think that varies depending upon where you're at
Mhm.
location wise, but I've seen a major uptick there. And a lot of, this last winter, I spoke at several schools, and one conversation that they brought up is there's such a demand for trade school education and that option, that they're struggling there because either they don't have the classes in place because we got rid of them, or they don't have the resources for them because of the demand in kids. Even my daughter talked about next year, she's excited to take two classes, Spanish 3 and home ec. She hasn't had it available. They haven't had a home ec teacher. And I remember back in high school, yes, we had that. And then in the years after, it got shut down and canceled. Oh, we don't need those things. We need
Yeah.
to be more of the AP, the classical education points. And now we're going back and realizing, oh, those are really, really good life skills that we need to teach. And, there's some high schools that have the opportunity. I know one local high school, they have an entire culinary program where they teach people about being chefs and sous chefs and that type of industry. Why? Because we need more and more of those people, because they're just not there, because we've de-emphasized that as a career base for so many years.
And my brain is going in so many directions right now because, we talk about leadership, from Gary Vaynerchuk to Grant Cardone. You know, you hear a lot, a lot
I
of
mean,
these hot
those are
takes that have,
two absolutely
right,
divergent
different,
personalities.
but and
Wow.
they're both big, and tons of people follow both of them, and you know, you get a lot of these people, whether they're 18 or 48, right? They're listening to these individuals, and you have someone like Grant Cardone, who's very opinionated and believes a certain way, and he had a recent, maybe I don't know how recent it was, but within the last year, I want to say he said this, where he would be embarrassed if he was making less than $400,000 a
Oh,
year.
yeah.
It was the most ridiculous statement, right? To say, and just I know I can
Well,
see
I
why
mean,
it's,
yeah, I mean, it's, I was, I think I saw that. It's actually a little bit older, but either way, it's still being played and played forward. And, I'll give him credit. It was taken out of context, right? But it was also him trying to implore people is you have to embrace the hustle culture. Let me sell you a product or come into my network and let me sell you something. That's the
yeah,
context of it. That's what he's trying to do and trying to make someone feel bad for making $400,000 or less. You know what?
yeah,
Okay, Grant,
yeah.
fine, rant and rave on you, but this is one of the pieces that I would say, other than you driving your ship, how are you personally benefiting others? Because then you share the other side of that, Gary Vee.
Yeah.
Gary Vee's not promoting a product or whatever else. He's sharing, hey, be a good person, be willing to do the work. He was a wine
His
connoisseur.
father
Yeah,
started
I
a
mean,
wine store. Yeah,
yes, he was
and he
doing
took
that
it
until
over.
his 30s, and he
Yeah,
like kept doing the work
yeah,
and was doing the work without saying, oh, I have to be someone else. And I think he's learned. I think he's learned he just needed to be him, and that's what people responded to. And I think, as much, I've read several of Grant's books. I've actually went to one of his events and realized, ooh, this is not for me. This is not for me because I had to get away from that pursuit and drive, that intensity,
mhm,
I'm just going to go through it because it drove people away. And I
right.
think we've actually seen that major change. We talked about this in Gary, where Gary's kind of, you know, become more empathetic, more compassionate, more humanistic in his impact, in my opinion, influence is growing and growing because of it. And you see
Absolutely.
someone like Grant that's kind of like, okay, you can be this spectacle because that's what you are, but are you actually helping people? Okay, maybe people buy your programs and maybe they learn something out of
He
that.
might be helping
But
himself.
really, like, what's the next generation beyond that? And I think that's one
Yeah,
of the things when I hear from the Grant Cardones, the Andy Frisellas, the Andy Elliott's, those type of figures that are so aggressive, so in your face, and it's like, yeah, you can go do this. And all right, great. What happens when that person's a leader? Because all of a
right.
sudden, that personal drive and intensity, it may get you, it's like the African proverb, one goes fast, many go far. So you can go fast, but when you're all alone sitting out there and you're lonely and you're miserable, what does that do for you?
It does
Nothing.
nothing. And I know some of these guys, and I understand, their thoughts and their mentality of they want to provide for their family. They want
Yeah.
to, achieve, material and whatever they want. They want to be able to do whatever the F they want whenever they want to do it. Right.
With
And I,
that type of mentality and,
right.
pervasiveness right in your face.
And it has to be intense and it has to be done this way. And that's not the truth. There's multiple ways to make a wealth for yourself, but also ultimately it is, and I think this, we're talking for this younger generation, it takes time. There isn't a lot of this stuff, you see sometimes and it feels like, how are they getting this instantaneous wealth and getting these things? I'm like, for when you get older, you want peace, right? There's a certain lifestyle, right, that actually you don't like, nothing actually was going to make you happier, like light you up. Those things really won't. It's health, right? Is your family healthy? Are you healthy? Are you comfortable with the certain things you have? The 10,000 square foot house and all the cars and all that crap, like that truly won't make chasing those things and obtaining them will not, they may give you gratification for like instantaneous hits of dopamine, but truthfully, they won't. And I think there is a lot of this where I just want to do whatever I want, have whatever I want, whenever I want. This is how I got it really aggressively. But understanding like being on a farm and living a certain way in peace is also a really fine way to live too,
I
right?
mean, we've seen a major increase in it over the last
Yeah.
few years, especially through the pandemic. People realized that, yes, we could chase and pursue some of those things, but then all of a sudden, when life gets shut down, taken away, and you look around and you're like, what do I have? And man, it's okay to have a different perspective on life. Yeah, Grant, go do you. That's fine. I'm not saying that that should be like you're wrong. But what I do disagree with is discounting someone else who maybe has a massively different pursuit in life,
Mhm.
or believing that the only way to get to
Correct.
a certain level of status and income is the one path that you have. Like there's a lot of very, very humble, gracious, giving, considerate people that live very modestly, that have built tremendous,
Mhm.
tremendous amounts of wealth. And if is that what it's about? I think one of the great lessons that I learned several years ago from John Maxwell was the difference between success and significance. Success is about you. Significance is about others. Success is about what can I get for me. Significance is about how can I pour myself out for others.
Yeah.
And as I've learned and I've experienced that, man, success is fleeting. You're always wanting more because it's never enough. Significance, you're always wanting more because of how impactful, how life changing it is. And I think when we talk about like impact driven, why is that? Because significance is about making an impact. And
Absolutely.
when we start looking at, hey, going back to, the central points that we've talked about today, is be willing to accept what drives you, what your purpose and passion. And sometimes that takes time. And it
Right.
takes time going through experiences, realizing, I tried that on, wasn't for me. I tried that on, that wasn't for me, but continue to move forward. Man, if you do that with the right heart and mindset, you'll find the opportunity.
Yeah. And we're not trying to shit on, whether it's Grant or Anthony or any of those. Like, go follow them, and by all means, like, maybe that is your community. Maybe you're like, I am really intense and this is where I want to be and I feel like, go do that. The point is that you have to find out who you are, right? Like,
Yeah.
who are you, the listener, as you're listening to this, and find that right path that really allows you to be of service, to be your true self, to get in the things that you want and desire, and you may want to test the different paths, right? There may be like
Yeah.
10,
Yeah.
and you maybe started going down one, and it's good for a while, but then you hit a point you're like, this isn't. As you evolve and grow, right? We change from when we're 18 to when we're 50, right?
Yeah.
As people, there different things happen. Or we become parents. We have
Yeah.
kids, and priorities change. And the one person you in the community you follow for a while, you may find yourself like, I'm actually gravitating towards this other direction.
Yeah.
You should start learning and educating yourself in that direction, because maybe that's where your heart center is and where you need to go. And that's okay. I think it's just like, for
Well,
me
I,
at
I
least.
think the big point that I want to underline, if there's not peace, it's wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that's not without struggle, that's not without challenge, that's not without, some type of headwind. But are you at peace where you're at? Or is this constant wrestling like, I don't feel like I fit, I don't feel like I'm, in the right place? Then you probably aren't. But when
Yeah.
you find the community and you find the place and you feel that peace of like, I'm on the right path, but it's still hard, then great, keep going.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I mean, yeah, we were joking earlier before we started, like, how long are we able to go with these, two subject matters, and kind of starting us off with kind of what's trending in the world today, and then going into, a little bit about the economy and
Yeah.
jobs and all the sorts of things, which I think is wonderful. And here we are, I don't even know, 40 minutes later, and we can probably keep going. Um, the last thing I kind of want to talk about is, we're going into this election year. again, with probably a country much divided into debates. I'm sure we're going to hear there's going to be tons of trending memes and videos about both sides. Um, where do you think, jobs, let's just stick with jobs and the economy and the status will be, heading into 2025? Is it going to be, kind of tailwinds or headwinds? I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I think a lot of it is how are things going to play out the next 5 months, 6 months. And I think that's what a lot of when we go back to some of the conversations we had about jobs and different industries that are saying either we've kind of limited our workforce or we're not looking to add, we're just kind of see how this year plays out, where the demands become. I think when we look at that domestically, that has a factor, and then we have to look globally. How are Israel, Ukraine, other potential uprisings, what economic factors affect the US globally? I think that's where it gets really confusing. And I think one of the challenges that we see here is what is going to be the new global policy? What is going to be the new economic policy for either one of these candidates, parties, really? Because, there's even some opinion that the current candidates might not even be the candidates come the election time. It is what it is, right? We won't get there.
Anything could happen.
Well, but I think that's where you look at the two parties and saying, all right, which path do we go on? This is what I believe. Because of what's happened the last several years, being involved in an industry, because I own cows, you might be able to see them there. They were just out behind me in the pasture right behind me. I paid twice the cost for those steers when I bought them about 3 weeks ago as I did for the steers that I bought 3 years ago. Twice the cost. Those costs are built in. So when we go back to the cost of living, we're not going to change them through an election. It is going to be with us for several years. So no matter who gets elected, it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat, it doesn't matter if a Republican, we have some absolute significant financial headwinds coming at us because of the raw costs of living. That's not going to change even if we see some repeals in energy or whatever other factors. It's already built in. And so I think that is, for either candidate, either party, how do we navigate through that? How do we make sure that the new college graduate has the amount of money to live? And what can we do to make that process easier for all families, all people up the chain? Because that's one of our major, I think, issues in our country right now is the financial instability that we're starting to say. I saw something this morning right now, 1 in 7 Gen Z, 1 in 7 Gen Z has a maxed out credit card. I think the credit card holding debt is higher now than it's ever been. I have a friend in that industry and he gives me that background information, but you can find it as well, where we continue to drive up that debt because we want to continue to live and the cost of living keeps going higher and higher and higher and higher because of the normal everyday costs that are trickle down, but also some of our policy. It's like, can this continue? So I think those are going to continue to show up through the year, and it's really going to probably be squeezed out around the election time. And what I am picking up from people, even friends that voted for one party, not the other 3.5 years ago, are saying, I have to vote for the other party because of this has been so bad. I didn't think it could be that bad, where I need to, we need some type of positive change, all the while knowing it's going to be 3 years until we'll actually see some of those initial points done, whichever party it is.
Yeah, I think just kind of connecting it back to leadership. If you're a leader, you're running your own small business or organization, because I do agree. I think there's a lot of headwinds. There's a lot of uncertainty. And I think just being aware and smart about spending, about what's happening in society, where things are going, for leaders out there, be cautious. I think caution is something that we need to take right now because soft landing, hard landing, whatever landing we have, because it will land somewhere, it's going to be a really in my opinion, tumultuous next few years. And I think leadership needs to be aware of that. And
Here's the other piece that is just hitting me as you're sharing that is we're also in a tremendous period of wealth transfer. So it's really this divergent culture. We have the challenges for the middle income and, which in many states is 180,000 and below. This middle income challenge of, man, it's really, really expensive to live. And then you have the older, a different, group of people financially that have a tremendous amount of wealth that they now need to move. And where does it go? And so those two ships sailing, the one wake is going to affect the other. And it's going to be very interesting how that plays out the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years, because that transfer is legit and it's getting invested into different places that maybe we haven't seen in the past.
Yeah. I mean, we can keep going. I think we save the, that one for a little as we dive deeper into that whole category of as we get further and further into the year. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome, brother.
Thanks for joining us. Glad to spend Monday with you, Newswire, and we'll do this again. Hopefully you got value. Remember, subscribe on YouTube so you can find all of this valuable content that the team, Alex and everyone else helps put together. Appreciate you being here. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.